Hello and welcome to more SEC football content here at Southeastern 16. I'm Chris Lee, joined by my partner Chase Robinson, also a new face on the show. You know him if you watched his show, Greason and Edwards here at the channel. But Jay Greason going to start joining us for some other stuff. Very excited about that. Jay, I want to give you a second to introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Sure. Glad to be here. You guys feel free to take the training wheels off. I'll push out into traffic, do the best I can. I'm Jay Greason. I'm a longtime columnist with the Chattanooga Times Free Press here in Southeastern Tennessee. Ooh, Southeastern. It's like if I was 16, we could have like some sort of website or something.
It's almost like that.
Almost 25 years. But been around SEC sports my whole life. Grew up in Atlanta, went to Auburn before the Hope Scholarship, or I'd probably gone to Georgia, and been a much happier football fan. I'm worried, fellas, that both of my kids are Auburn fans, and I'm afraid that the Tennessee Department of Childhood Services is going to come arrest me as child abuse because I've set them on a path for nothing but frustration.
My man, you have basketball season.
Well, yes, and yes, we can love some basketball, but this is the football show.
This is the football show. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chase because I think what we're going to do today, we're going to go into make or break teams for about half the league, or make or break games, excuse me. We're going to talk about this spring game thing where everybody's canceling spring games and all that, and get into all those things. Chase, I'm gonna throw it to you and just let you take us on our first pivot. Where do you want to go to start off the things today?
Yeah, so I've got this in two parts. We'll do part two another day of make or break games. I picked out 8 SEC teams that I want to because I was looking through schedules this week, and like what games on team schedules like could make or break the season. And some of them, as I look through it, I don't feel like there's games that will make or break because there's some schedules that are better than others. But I look at some of these schedules, and I'm like, some of these teams, like you get on a 3 or 4 game stretch where it's like they need to win 3 or 4 of those. Like it's tough. And so and I want to start with Florida because I think that's the most interesting one. We know Florida's got a tough schedule. We talked about it last year, and it's a lot of the same teams, just kind of in a different order somewhat for Florida. But I feel like they've got several make or break games. And there's a stretch of 3 in a row that I feel like could make or break the season for Florida. And it starts on September the 13th with a trip to Baton Rouge against LSU. The next week they go to Miami. And then on the first weekend of October, they've got Texas at home. So that's 3 straight games of at LSU, at Miami, and against Texas. I feel like that's tough, but that's I feel like a make or break part of the season where you can't lose all 3 of those if you're Florida right there in the end of September and early October.
I think one of the good things is you get is the bye week between Miami and Texas, of course. Yeah. And for me, of those 3, I think Texas is the biggest make or break. And the reason why is that you're at home, and LSU probably be a night game. Losing Saturday night in Red Stick, there is no shame in that. But as you talked about, if the dominoes start falling crooked, Billy Napier is going to hear those same catcalls that we heard last September. I mean, yeah, they finished much better, and the quarterback pulled his coaching pullover out of the fire on more than one occasion, and in the recruiting cycle. I mean, that kid – I've got a theory, and I'll share a bunch of my sports theories, but this one's called the Tebow theory, and we're talking about the Gators. When your best player is your hardest worker, you can do special things. And I think DJ Lagway has that kind of panache in the locker room in Gainesville. And, I mean, you're talking about 2 guys that their programs hinge on these 2 quarterbacks when Texas goes to the Swamp the first Saturday in October. But and you win 2 of those 3, especially the 2 SEC games, you set up a domino trail of every game being magnified.
Yeah. Yeah, but this one's tough, Chase. First of all, I thought last year's schedule was brutal. I don't know that it's got anything on this year's. My goodness. And the other thing is, like, we circled a lot of the make or break games earlier in the year last year. I think we might have even said the Miami game. Like, I would have thought that some early starts last year would have broken the Gators. They didn't. I think Jay's got the right answer here by virtue of venue. I mean, that's a big ask for Texas to be a make or break game, but it feels like the way that Florida progressed through the year, that's not an unreasonable ask. I think Jay's got the right answer on it, but man, there's so many games. I mean, you could even go. Here's one: Kentucky and Lexington, November 8th, just because it's a road game and it's later in the season, and if that's when Ole Miss stumbled against Kentucky last year. I don't think this is an easy one. I think you could almost circle 2/3 of the schedule is make or break games.
And that Kentucky trip to Lexington, it is sneaky cold as all get out in November in Lexington. And it's the week after the cocktail party. Another thing about me, I know I'm new to this place. I will forever call it the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. I do not think any other name applies. So that's where we are. Okay, good.
Absolutely.
I like it. Next team I want to talk about, and this is one, as I was looking at their schedule, I feel like there's a lot of make or break games, and that's the Auburn Tigers. I feel like they've got Baylor to start the season, which is an interesting game. I think that they've got to set the tone for the season early. Like, I feel like last year against Cal, they dropped the ball and things just went downhill. So, I mean, to me, that's a big one. You got to start off with a win. But then you at Oklahoma, first SEC game, you got Jackson Arnold as your quarterback. That's a big one. I feel like, especially what happened last year. I just look at this schedule for Auburn. I feel like a lot of them are, because Auburn is in a position. I feel like their roster is better, but I haven't completely bought into Hugh Freeze and what he's doing there. So I feel like there is a stretch, though, with Missouri, Arkansas, and Kentucky. And as I go through this, not all of them are 3-game stretches, but I feel like that's a part where these are games they need to win. And Auburn has not always won the games that they should, and they need to win. And so I feel like this year Auburn's in a position they've got to win the games that they should win, and that's their position they're in.
I think you touched on it with your first sentence. I think Baylor sets the entire tone for what is really a make or break season for Hugh Freeze. And if the offense doesn't click and the entire Auburn fan base starts going, oh God, here we go again, with the quarterback who can't get the ball to Cam Coleman, and they can't use a whole lot of the dynamic pieces they have in and around. Auburn's skill guys were good last year. They just continually shot themselves in the foot and then eventually in the face with shoddy quarterback play. And if on the road at Baylor, if you don't come out and you don't win, that's going to be the hottest seat in the league. And I'm an Auburn graduate, but what Bruce Pearl's doing in basketball is a ton of fun, and that's great. But if you're not winning football games on Saturday in Auburn, Alabama, then the program's not humming. Period. I don't care how good you are in everything else.
This is another one. Boy, they got last year the schedule set up for them, Chase, and we talked about how Auburn could do big things just based on that. This year, isn't that? I mean, I think they play – do they play 3 road games in 2025 at a point in the schedule before they'd played one a year ago?
No, their first 5 or 6 were at Auburn.
Right, that's what I mean. They played – and this year they've got week 2 on the road, week 5 on the road, week 6 on the road. Games that come to mind, Baylor for obvious reasons. I'm going to I think openers we tend to overrate, because you will see good teams sometimes stumble in an opener and all is lost, and then there's a recovery later. So I'm gonna cross Baylor off for that reason. Although, as Jay pointed out, the temperature is going to go up there. A couple I'm circling, Oklahoma and Norman is going to be kind of interesting because of the Jackson Arnold dynamic. And that's kind of one of the be those, well, if we can't beat Oklahoma, who can we beat based on the way they played the last few years? I think where I'm going to settle, though, is Auburn. Missouri at Auburn, because it's a home game. It's smack in the middle of the schedule. Missouri, for all Eli Drinkwitz has done, they are not considered a heavyweight on par with Alabama, LSU, some of those other programs, Georgia. And I look at the back part of that schedule. There's some winnable games there at Arkansas, Kentucky, at Vandy, Mercer, and then the weirdness that is the Iron Bowl. But if you're kind of going to that point of the season and you're kind of teetering on we may be mediocre, but we've got some time left to pull out a great season or a good season. You lose that Missouri game at that point at home. That's feels like the games left on the schedule where you're going to be favored are going to feel a little more hollow. Is that fair?
Oh, that's completely fair. And I'm just waiting to figure out how Eli Drinkwitz is going to get Brady Cook to make like a professional wrestler entrance coming down the stands in Jordan Hare. What is that? Brady Cook's music? Dun, 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 dun. I mean, good God, the horse tranquilizers that kid took to get back in the game last year in Columbia.
Yes, you heard that one too. Yeah.
Woo!
Wow.
And Jay, I want to get your thoughts on this on as far as Hugh Freeze goes at Auburn. Like, I know you start losing games, it's going to go downhill. But as we sit right now, do you think that he's in a position where his seat's pretty hot? Like, he has to win games. Like, how big to you is that first game? Like, is that we could see Hugh Freeze can in the middle of the year?
No, but I think if he wins 8 games, he needs to be real cautious opening emails from the AD in front of others. So this can't be a stub your toe. I mean, almost all the games Chris mentioned, you can't remain winless against Diego Pavia, Hugh Freeze. You can't not beat Missouri at home. I mean, yes, Missouri, Eli Drinkwitz has done some wonderful things, but you're Auburn. I mean, come on now. I mean, this isn't what that's supposed to be. And they're going to lose a good chunk of a whole lot of the familiar names out of Columbia this year. And it's one thing to get dominated by Georgia and to bang your head against the Alabama wall for years and years and years and years. But if you're going to go 5-7, 6-6, and cross your fingers to get to the Birmingham Bowl, you're not long-term for there. And it never helps that your 2 biggest rivals are Georgia and Alabama, and they're in the college football playoff almost every year.
Yeah, that's very true. Next team I want to get to is LSU. And I feel like kind of on the same path as we talked about Auburn, like LSU has not been a team to do well in openers. And I think this year they open up at Clemson, which is interesting. I think Brian Kelly needs to win that game. Start this season off with a win, and you get into the SEC. You know, I think they'll do well in the SEC. I think it's going to be a good LSU team. Obviously, trips to Alabama and Oklahoma will be tough down the stretch. But I think the opener for LSU against Clemson there is going to be, I think that's make or break.
All right. Watch this. I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth and point at each of you as I'm doing it, because I completely agree with you. That's the game I wrote down. But as Chris said earlier, you can lose that first game and still come back and have a great year, because if Brian Kelly loses at Clemson, he'll be 0-4 in openers in his time in Red Stick. But 2 of those years ended with 10 wins. And this one is not as backbreaking potentially, because it is at Clemson. You can still get to the playoff with a loss at Clemson.
Yeah.
I don't think Auburn can't get anywhere close to where it wants to be if it loses at Baylor. So in that term of openers, I think the one that Brian Kelly really needs to get his hands around is when Florida comes to LSU. I really think he needs to, because even Brian Kelly's biggest detractors can understand losing to a Clemson team that's going to have probably the best quarterback in the ACC coming back, who's going to be on those Heisman lists. I mean, Cole at the end of the year last year was great.
Yeah.
Saturday night in Death Valley, and can we call that the Death Valley Bowl? The winner gets to keep the name Death Valley. The other one has to change the name of the stadium.
Yeah.
But when Gainesville comes calling, Brian Kelly needs that one.
Sam's liking what he's hearing, by the way, Jay.
What's that?
The comment. Sam Smith said, we're going to need you in every video.
No. Well, no, that's Stan Smith, his older brother. I loved those shoes growing up. They were tremendous.
Jay, you kind of took a lot of my thoughts. I think we're thinking a lot alike today. I think Clemson, I mean, Brian Kelly has lost openers every year he's been at LSU and somehow ends up doing better things. And like you said, that one's kind of a free spot, it feels like a little bit. The two that I circled, one would be Florida, because if you lose there to Florida after last year, boy, does the talk heat up. That's, well, Florida wanted Billy Napier gone, and then he beat us. And then what's it going to look like there, especially if you lose Clemson? I'll give you one that's a sleeper, and it's more of a break than a make. But I think Vandy on October the 18th, that is in Nashville. Vanderbilt, as we saw, was good enough to beat just about anybody last year. That'll be in Nashville if they're having a big year. Be an exciting game for them. That'll be a game that Vanderbilt circles, I think. That's one that, like, if somehow you're just kind of plodding along and then you lose that one, I mean, good luck to Brian Kelly at that point, because how many times have we seen losing to Vandy cost a coach a job in this league? That one doesn't make you, but it can certainly break you if it goes wrong.
No, yeah, most certainly. Next up, I want to talk Texas, and just kind of looking at their schedule. I feel like they've got the roster to be good again. They've got the schedule to be good again. I feel like, and we talked about Florida earlier. Like, I feel like Texas going to Gainesville could be tough. But then I look at Georgia, like, Texas just they can't beat Georgia. They got to get over that hump if they want to be the best in the league. And so I feel like the trip to Florida could be a make or break. And then I circled Georgia because I think that'll be a huge game. Both teams will be good again. And they couldn't beat Georgia this year.
It's hard not to look at that one, but I think they get an opportunity to have the league's biggest make or break game week one going to the Horseshoe. I mean, I don't think that's a make or break season game for either Ohio State or Texas, who are both going to be in it till the end. But in a year after that, it was pretty clear that I think even on an SEC platform, Big Ten passed SEC in football. I mean, I was talking to Chris earlier this week, Chase, that I can make a hard argument that football is the sixth best sport in the SEC right now. I mean, 2 weeks ago, there were 5 sports that had polls out: baseball, softball, gymnastics, and both basketballs. There are 25 spots in the top 5 of those 5 polls. 18 of them were SEC teams. So, I mean, that's 72%. I'm going to take my sock off here in a second because my Auburn math is kicking in. But but as we were talking about Auburn, all that's well and good and tremendous. And God bless Auburn Equestrian and yay team. It don't matter if it ain't on Saturdays in the fall, period. Yeah. It just doesn't matter. And I'm not one of these guys who does the chest bumping SEC chants, because I've always thought if Alabama and Georgia win, that's going to hurt my team in recruiting. So I'm not a huge believer in I'm cheering for them just because they're in the SEC. I am cheering for Texas to go up there and drag Ohio State up and down the fence line.
Chase, I want to ask you a question. Are we giving Ohio State as a free spot?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I just don't know. Again, I see openers like that as survivable if you look. And I tend to, I don't know, for whatever reason, my pessimistic nature kicks in when we do these, because, in the SEC, when you lose a game, it is, it's like a 5-alarm fire, no matter who, where, when, for half the league. But Chase, I like the one that you kind of brought up. I think Georgia. I'm going to flip the emphasis to make here, because if you beat Georgia, at that point, assuming the rest of your season has gone well, can you maybe claim yourself as the king of the hill in the league for the time being? I mean, that's been Georgia's spot for a while till somebody knocks them off. Texas
Well,
has
in
been having a
Athens,
hard
I
time
think
doing
you
that.
can
Yeah,
wave that banner, but
yeah,
I think if you go 0-2 in those 2 road games, you're playing for your life on everything else, right?
yeah,
Because you may run the rest of that schedule and everybody look up and go, have the Indiana argument. Yeah, but what'd you do in your 2 biggest ones?
yeah.
Especially if they get smoked now.
I want to ask you guys, like, how many games on this schedule? And look, I'm still not to the point where I understand what Texas has got. I've seen Texas as a top 5 team. And I think this is, Chase, you and I talked last year when we watched them, how deep they were. Like, they were 2, 3 deep at every spot. They're going to lose 13, 14 guys to the NFL between the draft and free agent, guys that have a shot to make it. So I'm kind of wondering where this settles. Like, are they going to be okay between recruiting, the portal, and everything? Are they going to be a top 5 Texas team again? If so, let's say that they're that level. How many games on this slate do you guys think are losable for them?
Maybe just the 2 we mentioned.
Yeah.
See, I don't know, because the schedule always takes twists and turns. I think Ohio State's losable on the road. I think Florida on the road is losable. I think Georgia on the road is losable, and A&M, just by the nature of the rivalry game, is losable. And God forbid a Kentucky or somebody like that gets you on the road.
And to your point, and this is a real visor tip to Sark. When Texas had the year that Michigan won the Natty, so 2 years ago, the 4 teams that made it to the final rendition of the 14 playoff, they all had double-digit draft picks. Only Texas was back in the mix last year. Everybody else took a sizable step back. We saw what happened to Michigan. We saw what happened to Washington. I mean, so that conversation is he's assembled a ton of talent. I mean, for God's sakes, how good are you if you're going to help Quinn Ewers pack his bags to go somewhere else? He's on the cover of the video game. I mean, so yeah, you got some dudes now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Georgia, our next team. And again, looking through their schedule, it's manageable. I feel like Tennessee is their first SEC game of the season. It's in Knoxville. I mean, you set the tone for the SEC right there, because the games before that, they've got Marshall and Austin Peay, and then a trip to Knoxville. Like, you set the tone right there, but we know that's a tough place to play, and like you can set the tone for the SEC slate right there with that trip to Tennessee.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think it's the biggest game for both teams. I mean, because Tennessee's mired in some really eye-poppingly bad streaks. They've lost 10 straight times at Alabama. They've lost 10 straight times in the Swamp. They've lost 8 straight everywhere to Georgia. So, I mean, if they have playoff aspirations, but it starts and stops. Both of these teams have playoff aspirations. September 13th, you got to believe game day is going to be there. You got to believe that the hype around this thing is going to be off the charts, especially for everybody in orange. Georgia's now, in the time Kirby's been there, this is, well, we take our briefcase and it's a business trip because we're going to get everybody's best shot, but we're just better than you. So, but for Tennessee and Georgia, I think you're 100% right, Chase. I think September 13th is, I don't even know if you can put a big enough circle around that.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was like, when was the last time Tennessee beat Georgia? It was the Juwan Jennings Hail Mary game. And I guess this is one reason I don't get wrapped up on like one game, because, boy, if you use that as a harbinger at the time for where both programs were headed, you were going to be wrong by a lot. That was 2016. I kind of feel, guys, I'm going to start with you, Chase. Georgia obviously slipped. We can debate how much. I feel like Tennessee is tough to get in Knoxville. ask Alabama about that. Alabama had owned that rivalry for a while, and then Tennessee had something coming for them both times. I feel like with Georgia, Chase, if you're Georgia, you go and lose that in Knoxville. Does a little bit of panic start to set in? Because you saw what happened last year with the playoffs. You saw what happened the year before, getting left out of the playoffs. A couple things you can kind of pass off. But you go in your first big test if you're Georgia, you lose in Knoxville to a team that you've been ahead of for a while. It feels like maybe a different feeling sets around that program for a bit.
Yeah, but Georgia went to Tuscaloosa and lost in what I think it was their second SEC game this past year, and obviously they were still won the SEC, got to the playoff. But you start out with a win like this in Knoxville, like I think that Georgia is in a much better position winning that game than they are losing that game for a multitude of reasons, obviously. But I think it would be a huge statement, I think, for Georgia to go up there again, especially with Tennessee's. And I know we'll get to Tennessee, later on our list, but I feel like to go to Tennessee with like Jay said, the playoff aspirations that they have this season, I think that would be a huge statement for Georgia to be able to go up there and win that game, especially if they were able to win it convincingly.
I also think in the make or break category, Georgia can rebound from this better than Tennessee can. This is Tennessee's next best shot to dent Kirby Smart. This could be a make or break game for Gunnar Stockton, though. I mean, there are a lot of Georgia fans who have very high hopes for this kid. And as we mentioned on our other show, Chris, when we were talking about the LSU baseball player named Bear, if your name's Gunnar, you either need to be a fighter pilot or a quarterback, baby, because that is a hot shot name. So, but if you go up there and lay an egg in prime time on ABC, and everybody's now wondering, Carson Beck, can he come back? I mean, so this will be a really big stage for him to either take a huge step forward or everybody wondering if there's going to be a quarterback controversy in Athens.
I got one little issue with Jay's theory here about this meaning a little bit more for Tennessee. The problem comes order of schedule. You guys catch who Georgia's got the week after that? Got Alabama. And, boy, if you lose to Tennessee, that's going to be a pressure-packed game.
But don't you think that game's going to be pressure-packed regardless? I mean, we make it game day Georgia, Tennessee, and then Georgia, Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, it is, but it takes on a different tone if you lose in Knoxville, I think.
Yeah. No, there's – and the only bad thing you can say about Smart, and you can only say it about Saban, is they don't know how to handle defeat. And I mean, if that's the knock, then yes, sign me up for it. But I mean, the images of the frat boys getting all teary-eyed when one of those teams lost in the last decade, amazingly, make me laugh out loud. But the conversation of, because you're now looking up in Alabama, and I know they're not on our list. We'll get to them next time. But Alabama's going to have to come out with some swings now. I mean, because there's a whole lot of people looking around going, Saban ain't in the building anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that one could be fascinating. And Alabama, by the way, has got Wisconsin the week before. I wouldn't expect Wisconsin to beat him, but it's not, it's not playing the Citadel. So
did y'all see Luke Fickell got an extension? Dude's 12 and 13 at Wisconsin. I mean, come on, bro.
Yeah.
That didn't quite get that one either.
Who's trying to hire Luke Fickell? Now there's a name.
Jay, I'm curious as you look at Georgia's schedule, because I feel like the games we've talked about, Tennessee, Alabama, those are early in the schedule. Are there any later in the schedule? Obviously Georgia Tech played them well last year. Do you feel like there's any like make or break scenarios later in the season for Georgia? Because we're talking, early September, October with Tennessee and Alabama, or is it okay? You get past these and you're able to cruise.
You bring up a great point, Chase, because after Alabama, Now, I will say to that, Georgia gets a bye after Tennessee, and then a week, so an extra week to prepare for Alabama. Which, yeah, it's the two biggest swing games. I mean, I guess Texas. I mean, we circle back. Wow, I'm looking at StubHub. You want to guess the cheapest ticket you can find for Georgia at Texas currently? $507.
Oh, man.
Boys, it's February 25th.
Hope you don't need 4. Goodness.
But, I mean, there's no way they don't win 10 games, right? The only way they don't win 10 games is they go 0-3 in Knoxville, at home at Alabama, and at home at Texas. I mean, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. This is another reason we get media passes.
Amen.
Well, if you want the building otherwise, yeah.
Well, yeah, but they pay us media rates, bro.
That's true.
So,
I'm not sure
we get in the game. We just can't get a hot dog.
Right.
Next up, let's talk Kentucky. The Wildcats. I think a very interesting year for Kentucky and Mark Stoops, and see if they can get back going in the right direction, or if this is what we saw last year is just kind of what we're going to see. Big year. I think obviously Ole Miss game 2 for Kentucky. I feel like Kentucky has early SEC games every year. I think the Ole Miss one is big. Game they were able to win last year. They get Ole Miss at home this year, so I think that one's big. I think going to South Carolina is big for Kentucky. If they can go win that could get them going in a nice direction. I didn't know honestly what to think about Kentucky first of all, but it's a hard schedule for the Wildcats.
It is a very hard schedule, and you're looking at a real opportunity to start 0-4 in the SEC. I mean, 0-5 even. I mean, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Georgia, Texas, Tennessee out of the gate. Ain't nothing easy about that. But I'm going to go off the beaten path here a little bit. Considering they got trounced by Louisville last year, there's a real chance Mark Stoops who has more wins than anybody in the history of Kentucky's program, Bear Bryant included. Could he be coaching for his job against the Louisville Cardinals?
Well, I'm wondering if it's before that potentially with the schedule.
Yeah, and because you can explain some of those away. You lose the week before Louisville in Nashville. They're going to be some ticked off Commodore folks really ready for basketball to start bouncing.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you one. This is the real pessimistic take. What happens if you lose to Toledo in week 1? Toledo is I get they're not a SEC, but they have taken down some teams from time to time, been near the top of the MAC. I don't think that's where I circle. Yeah,
that game on a Tuesday. I think by rule it has to be required to play. Come on, we can get that on Tuesday, right?
Yeah. Maybe I hope so. That's at the point where we're trying to watch 16 different games on a Saturday. And boy, that's a lot of fun. Trying to go on at 9 at night and talk intelligently about what happened with 16 different games. So I can support that. Yeah, I mean, I look at the schedule. I'm like, who took over the scheduling for Kentucky? I know it's a league this time, but this is the team that usually gets those easy paths right away. That's not the case at all. I think the one did you guys? I was doing some. Have you guys made your official picks yet? Because I think I've got mine, but I want to hear yours first.
The Chase said, started with Ole Miss, and at home, I think that's a pretty good call because Ole Miss is going to be a lot better than people think because there's not going to be a big step backwards at quarterback for them. But I honestly think at South Carolina is really going to be a tone setter because if you don't split Ole Miss, South Carolina, if you're Mark Stoops, you are really staring 0-5 in the league in the face.
Yeah. Chase, what did you have?
I went with Ole Miss just because it's game 2, it's first SEC game.
Yeah, see, I think that's too early, and Ole Miss is going to be really good. I think that's one that you can kind of write off as We sort of expected to lose that. It's revenge game. Here's the one that I'm circling. Again, this is looking towards the negative. I think that game November 1st at Auburn, that could be losing coach goes home.
Could be. Because if you lose that one, there's a real opportunity to be 0-6 in the league after going 1-7 last year.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about, I think they just need to collect as many as they can get. I mean, it feels like almost all of them are break and very few of them are make for Kentucky.
Yes.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Although if you beat South Carolina, Columbia week 4, that's a big feather in your cap. If we're going to look at it optimistically,
and South Carolina's not on our docket this fine right after lunchtime here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. But then Beamer ball is taking funny bounces. Ain't nobody going to be happy coming home from Columbia with that quarterback losing to Kentucky.
Yeah.
Let's talk Missouri. They get their first 6 games at home this season. I think a big win for Missouri is they get South Carolina in game 4 of the season. That's at home, which I think it's tough to play in Columbia, Missouri there. So I think that's a big win, playing a good South Carolina team. But I also think their first road game at Auburn is could be a make or break type game. So I think South Carolina's tough coming into Columbia, Missouri, but I think going to Auburn is big. That'll be their first road game, 7 games into the season.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little earlier than that. They get Alabama at home and second Saturday in October. And let me double check something, but that anytime you think you can take a swing at Alabama and have a puncher's chance, it can be program defining. I mean, ask Clark Lee what it did for his team last year. And just the feeling in the program, the whole vibe that generates from everything. If you can take down Alabama, it's massive. And what feels like a real trend this year is something to watch, because we mentioned it with Georgia. Missouri has an extra week off to prepare for Alabama.
Yeah. Trivia time. Anybody know the last time Missouri beat Alabama?
Was Derek Chivas wearing his Band-Aid under his eye playing basketball in Columbia?
One of us understands that. Chase wasn't around at that point. But
I guess my Steve Stepanovich joke is just going to go zooming by his well-coiffed hair too. So,
A for effort, Jay.
No, John
Chase,
Sundvold, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know.
Is he the announcer? Yeah.
You're getting closer than you think. It would have been. Oh, and an ad pops up. So that's lovely. I believe 1975 is the date. Ooh. Yes, it is. September 8th,
Kellen
1975.
Winslow was on that team. Kellen Winslow may have been on that team.
I think he was even too young for that, maybe. It would have been close. I don't know what these two teams were doing playing September the 8th, 1975, but Missouri took one home by a 20-7 score in Birmingham that day.
To borrow the great line from Vitas Gerulaitis playing tennis after Bjorn Borg had beaten him 18 consecutive times, Vitas came to the press conference and said, "Nobody beats Vitas Gerulaitis 19 straight times." So every 50 years, Missouri's going to get Alabama.
That feels like the pick for me too. I mean, you can. I mean, gosh, the scheduling gods shone brightly on Missouri for 2 years in a row, because of the first 5 games, the only one that they might be an underdog in is South Carolina. But you get that one in your Columbia, not their Columbia. So I think that Alabama game at that point, if by chance Missouri is unbeaten, you get Alabama there, boy, you are riding high.
Completely agree.
Yep. Our last team I want to get to is Tennessee, and we talked about their big game with Georgia. But and we learned this year, look, you can you can lose a couple of games and still get in the college football playoff. So that's the dream for Tennessee, is to be in the college football playoff. So even if you lose that one to Georgia, okay, you still have a chance. So I would look later down the season. I think the Alabama game is going to be crucial, but I think that game at Florida, like that is your second to last game. Like you got to win that one if you want a shot at the playoff. You've got to beat Florida in Gainesville.
And we referenced a stat earlier. I think you're onto something, Chase, because you've lost now 10 straight times down there. And a whole lot of those have not been super good Florida teams. And, I mean, so the conversation is, if not now, when, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if Florida's reeling. Because if Florida doesn't build off last year's momentum, that punch could be doubly painful. I mean, because when you can knock out a coach, their recruits become available. The program takes a step back. This is one you're going to compete with Florida every single year. So this is, if not now, when type of moment for Josh Heupel.
I feel like we could go in a time machine and go 30 years back or 30 years forward, and the right answer always has a decent chance to be Florida. Given Tennessee's series history there, am I wrong?
Boy, oh boy, no, you're not wrong. And what that game meant in the 90s was just everything.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and plus it's, guys, I think it's also schedule order. You know, remember what happened in the South Carolina game, this point on the schedule 3 seasons ago with Hendon Hooker. Sorry, I don't mean to bring up a painful memory for Tennessee fans, but that was at the point of the season where losses seemed to matter a little bit more. And for a team that is plausibly set up for the playoff, especially if you look at this schedule, I think the schedule spot there is even more of a big deal.
Depending on how Florida handles some of its early business,
yeah,
this could be a make or break playoff game for either one of these.
Yeah. Hey, how about that? Give me Tennessee, Florida in a game of college football playoff significance in late November. I mean, that feels like a good thing for the league.
It was for terrible reasons, but when they, after 9/11, when they had to move that to the last game of the season, holy buckets, the stakes of that puppy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is 8 teams, make or break games. We'll do the second half of this another day here on our live stream. Before we go, I do want to discuss, look, spring practice for some teams starting the next couple of weeks. We're seeing the cancellation of spring games. And so we talked a little bit about this last week, Chris, but I want to get your thoughts, Jay, just on now these teams starting to pull the plug on these spring games.
Well, I don't think it's a lasting concept, but hold with me here for a second, because I've got a theory on this. I don't think it's a lasting concept because in towns like Auburn, Alabama, businesses make or break their bottom line with Saturdays in the fall and the occasional spring game. Even if you're only getting 40,000, that's a heck of a lot better than what you're normally going to get foot traffic in merchandise, in restaurants, and people spend the night. I loathe spring games with tricked up scoring schedules.
Yes.
2 points for a sack, and a holding is -3, or all that other bull snot. I think we can all agree that college football is going to expand the playoff. The money spigot is open wide, and everybody's going to stand there like Michael Richards did in the robbed of an Academy Award UHF with Weird Al Yankovic, and he drinks from the fire hose. So, but we're not going to be able to push it into further later into January because of a lot of reasons. Here's what you do. You take the money games out of early September. So Tennessee doesn't play UTC on Labor Day weekend. They play them in a spring game.
Yes.
And you then pay UTC to come up there, so they're still getting paid. Then this game's on TV. The SEC network's doing cartwheels because they actually got real football. You don't have to muck it up too bad. Nico Imaliava doesn't need to play every snap. It's still a spring game. Nobody's going to get their feelings hurt. And then you've actually got football that people care about, will come see, and you are helping the little brothers with the money games that they need to survive, because what is a $500,000 check that UTC could sneeze and spend that money that Jimmy Haslam can find under his sofa cushion in quarters. UTC, that's a sizable chunk of their athletic budget. So you check that box. You check spring football that we all love, and it's fun and it's meaningful, and then you're also prepared for an extra round of playoffs in this. When you move the college schedule up a week.
That is exactly what I was thinking. I thought it might be maybe a MAC team instead that you'd get in the spring game, but that's even better. You move those games to your spring game, and then you can play a Toledo or somebody that's like that might on the right day beat mid-level, lower-level SEC
and
team, and then it's a real game, right?
Yes, and the reason I was throwing out Tennessee and UTC is because I think the future is going to be big brother play little brother, so the money stays in the same university system. Like Alabama is going to play Jack State a heck of a lot more than it's going to play, I don't know, Georgia Southern in the future.
I mean, Chase, you're down on Alabama. I would think that would fly pretty well if you could get, Auburn and Alabama A&M or Alabama and Alabama State, something like that. That solves a lot of issues.
It does, yeah. And even, covering Jack State when Rich Rod was here, he would publicly say things like that all the time of how he wanted to play teams like that in the spring. And I think coaches would be for that. Like if given the opportunity, even the smaller school coaches, because they can get a check out of it, but the bigger schools, like you get to play another team. You don't have to do a scrimmage in the spring and things like that. So, I mean, I'm for that. I think a lot of people would be for that.
Now here's a risk for you, and I'm going to see if you're thinking of it before I say it. If you're a UTC or a SWAC team, there's a risk there. See if you can figure it out.
Well, you risk one of these kids hopping in the portal over the summer.
Yep.
I mean, if UTC goes up there and they've got it wasn't that long ago that Cole Strange was a first-round pick by the Patriots. Yeah. So as an interior lineman, and if they go up there and Knoxville goes, hey, that kid can play. But it's funny, my wife's mother is a huge Auburn basketball fan, and she goes to all the tip-off clubs and all those other things. And the requirements about how long you can talk to a opposing player as a coach in the handshake line have become astronomical. If you stop for more than like 5 seconds, there are concerns of tampering.
Yep.
Telling a kid that, hey, great game, you scored 25 against us, but you better keep walking, because otherwise the conversation is going to be, hey, we got NIL coin. Hey, come over here, look at the jungle. Those kind of things.
Well, news flash, even if that doesn't happen, they'll find a way to hop into your DMs. So I don't know how much that solves things, but I get what you're saying. I mean, here's the thing that I do. Okay, fine. UTC, we'll come play you at Tennessee. If you grab one of our players in a portal, you're going to pay us $1 million. I'm wondering if that works its way into contracts, where if you start snagging other teams' players from that scenario, okay, you can do it, but there's a check involved.
Well, and it kind of plays into what Nico's alleged $8 million NIL thing was when he came out of high school and went to Knoxville, is that it was tiered, that he only got the full check if he stayed 3 years in Knoxville.
Yeah. Yeah. Contracts fix a lot of what's wrong with college football, guys.
So does common sense. And
who
would Nick Saban being the czar of this thing? Because the Mark Emmert play of deciding to be an ostrich and sticking your head in the sand and hoping everything goes away, that ain't working. So
can you show me that again?
I can do it. Yep.
I like that.
Good stuff. Good stuff, guys. Any parting thoughts before we head out of here on this Tuesday?
No. Other than I've decided that I'm gonna end both these shows with a Bull Durham quote, and I love winning. I bleeping love winning. It's better than losing.
Yeah. Chase, I got a question for you. What is the tally on spring games that have been canceled in the league?
I
we have
think
that?
Texas is the only one in the SEC so far.
Is that it? Okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
But
Austin doesn't need a spring game to be a vibrant. I mean,
Right.
Athens, Georgia, Auburn, Alabama, and Oxford, Mississippi, they ain't canceling those anytime soon.
Yeah.
Chase, what happens if Alabama or Auburn cancel the spring game? Is it like a full-on revolt on the Capitol? I mean, what does that
Probably.
look like? Yeah.
Probably. Because look, you get a lot of these fans, and you know, a lot of families like, hey, you can't fork out money to go watch a game in the regular season. Well, it's free in Tuscaloosa and Auburn, you know, in a lot of places. Family trip. Let's go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the only time you can see football maybe without breaking the bank. I mean, like even maybe, you know, a SWAC team or something, you can do it manageable. But I mean, we've been looking at these ticket prices all hour, and they're crazy just for any SEC game.
We took both of our kids and our son's best friend and my wife and I, the five of us, went to Alabama A&M and at Auburn in the opener. And even for that game, and sitting really high up, I mean, it was $300 in tickets, and that's before shirts and hats and hot dogs and Cokes and all the rest of it, man. Hey, it ain't cheap falling in love with a football team. I probably would have broken up with Auburn, but I'd have to replace my entire wardrobe. So, I mean, I can't do that. So, you are who you are, right?
All right. Last one. We missed important business, gentlemen. I'll see which one of you gets this. Jay gets it, I think. That might
the squariest green is makes me think of the Key and Peele routine.
That's what this is. That's exactly what this is.
Mothershed.
Have you seen that, Chase?
I have not. No.
That's worth a Google. That's a good 5-minute laugh of your time.
Okay. Well,
the avatar here is terrific too, by the way.
Now, this comes from Joe Mother. Is his mom mother? I mean, what do we go there?
Yeah, is his dad Joe Daddy?
Father, mother.
Yeah. This begs many questions.
All right, appreciate it, guys.
You guys have carried me along, and I appreciate it greatly.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Chris. We will be back Thursday, another live stream. We'll do this Tuesdays and Thursdays on top of all the basketball, baseball content we have here. So subscribe if you have not already, and we will see you again soon here on Southeastern 16.